Alrighty, folks, what's going on? This is Matt here for Dark1 Linux Tech Gamers, the fusion of Linux technology and gaming, and we are looking at a video from Austin Evans, who is a very well-known and big tech YouTuber. Now, anybody who knows me knows I take issue with tech YouTubers because generally they tend to not live in the realm of normal as far as it relates to people's use of technology and how they go about interacting with it, etc. Usually they're like, "Oh, here's my $20,000 CPU," kind of shit. Um, and it's just a gripe I have. Um, but this one caught my interest because I'm curious to see what his version of what makes Windows the problem is. Um, because as a Linux user, it's been interesting over the last decade of saying the same damn things about the same damn problems with Windows across the board, and it generally finally actually bitch slapping people into reality. That oh hey, people weren't kidding. Funny how it turns out. But let's get into what Austin has to say and talk about why Windows is a problem.
A family friend asked me for advice on buying a new laptop. I asked her what she was upgrading from, and the answer was a 2017 LG Gram. Excuse me? I mean, that seemed like a perfectly reasonable laptop, and she said that there were no issues at all with the hardware. So why did she need to upgrade? Windows 11. Well, Windows 10 was showing an ominous, "Your computer is no longer supported" message. And while it was asking her to upgrade to Windows 11, as soon as you tried to do that, it showed as not being compatible. Now this is happening to millions of people right now. October 2025 marked the end of support for Windows 10, and while Microsoft did extend it by another year, you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get that, and sometimes you actually have to pay for those extended security updates. For most people, the message is clear. Upgrade to Windows 11, or buy some new hardware even if your current system is still perfectly capable. This got me thinking, what went wrong with Windows to bring us to the point where people are ready to throw away perfectly good PCs for, if I'm honest, kind of a silly reason?
What happened to Windows was Microsoft to create a bunch of e-waste. Forced obsolescence is a thing. You could argue the same thing that Apple's done over the years by making things more compact, more tight, glued down, almost fucking impossible to repair. Every OEM across the board, with very few exceptions, has made it almost goddamn impossible to repair things, to make it user accessible to repair it, etc. So the fact that Microsoft went this way with its hardware requirements with like TPM2 and all the other stuff shouldn't shock fucking anybody. So the fact that it does is kind of mind-boggling to me. Now, I'm somebody who is a realist that technology moves on to a certain point. I was one of the first people that, barring some necessities for 32-bit libraries and that kind of stuff, when it came to Windows or 32-bit architectures for support on Linux specifically, like we've been using x64 since like 2006. At some point, you have to move on beyond it. So that was probably 2021 when I started talking about that. It, it it's a thing. Unfortunately, technology evolves and moves on. I'm not saying that hobbyists and others, et cetera, can't take open source stuff and revamp it to repurpose and maintain that stuff if they so choose. That's the awesome perk of open source and floss, whatever fucking terminology you want to use. But the way Microsoft went about it was so ass backwards. It's not even funny. TPM, Trusted Platform Module. Piece of hardware. It's essentially, kind of like the secure thing in the T2 chips and Macs. It's just a Windows equivalency kind of thing. Is it necessary? Relatively speaking, probably not for 99% of most fucking users. Because they argue secure boot's the same way. How many UEFI secure boot keys were compromised recently that basically nullified secure boot, according to some recent reports. So, it's relative. It really is. I think if Microsoft had not shot itself so much in the foot with the TPM2 requirement, then I don't think we'd be hearing about the Windows stuff as much because, like, I'm running on a 2019 system. It's Windows 11 compatible. I don't fucking want Windows on it. FYI, I don't run Windows on this system. So I think Microsoft creating artificial hurdles is just creating e-waste and shooting themselves in their own foot with bad PR when they didn't need it, and they are super good at creating their own bad PR.
Copilot.
AI! The Windows 11 requirements just don't make sense in my opinion. You've probably heard of things like TPM 2.0 being a requirement. Now, it is a legitimately useful security chip that's been standard on most PCs since around 2016. But you also need a processor from a very specific list to support Windows 11. If you've got a 7th generation Intel processor from 2017, sorry, not supported. But a nearly identical 8th gen chip from 2018, oh, you're good to go. Now, was this necessary? Did Windows 11 need these specs to function? I don't think so. With a little tinkering, people have gotten Windows 11 running on way older hardware just fine. But Microsoft drew a line, and millions of computers ended up on the wrong side of it. I understand that they have to cut out older systems somewhere, but I also can't help but feel that there was some middle ground between Windows 10 supporting a potato and Windows 11 basically requiring a brand new computer. But this is only half of the story. Let's say you are on Windows 11. What exactly are you getting? Well, I had a chat about this with Yusuf Mehdi, Microsoft's Chief Product Officer back in October of 2024.
In this phase of AI, now there's so many things, there's so much, hype and excitement. We have to make this call on security in particular. They all kind of end up coming back to the world of AI in some ways.
The AI PC era, Copilot, neural processing units. While sure, some of the features in Copilot Plus PCs are kind of cool, I gotta ask, has it all been worth it? Has it justified forcing people to upgrade perfectly good hardware? And the biggest question, what if Windows is the problem? What if the hardware is just fine and we just need better software? I decided to find out, so I grabbed this. I actually reviewed this exact laptop 8 years ago, back in 2017. It's an LG Gram, almost exactly like the one that my family member was ready to upgrade, which got me thinking, this while I was running Windows 10 right now, and I will say, running Windows 10 very badly, what if Windows wasn't my only option? Alright, so I have just installed Zorin OS on this, a 2017 LG Gram. The pitch with Zorin OS is that this is a flavor of Linux which is specifically designed to be very friendly to someone who's coming off of.
So, well, that went in a different direction than I thought it was going to. So, Zorin OS, interesting choice. I'm not gonna say I hate it. Zorin is that kind of good middle ground for people looking to kick the tires, essentially. Something to me, anyway, that Ubuntu used to kind of once fit, where it was like kick the tires and get your foot in the door, essentially, with Linux. And well, there's just other distros that do Ubuntu better than Ubuntu, unfortunately. But yeah, it's not so much the hardware is the problem, the software is the problem, and the software being Microsoft software is the problem. And as it relates to Copilot and AI and just Microsoft has done dirty Windows as far as the same way they've done dirty to Xbox. Like, I have an Xbox Series X sitting back there, and you know what? I don't remember the last time I turned it on. It really boils down to give me a reason. There's no reason for me to boot it up. There's no reason for me to have fucking Copilot. There's no reason for Microsoft to shove fucking ads in my file browser. There's no reason for Microsoft to pre-install all the bullshit that it does on a clean install. There's no need for all the fucking telemetry. There's no need. The only need is so we can sell advertisement and create shadow user profiles that are more specifically aimed to you. That's your data is valuable. Your metadata is more valuable to them than your data, because then they can push ads and then they can target other stuff to you. That is literally all it is. It's the same MO as Google. It's the same MO kind of as Apple. Apple just does it a little differently, but Microsoft handing over the encryption keys to, I believe it was the FBI or whatever, recently for BitLocker stuff. Like, give me a break. Like, you think I want to fucking trust this goddamn company when you can't even figure out your own fucking products? This company literally, I've never seen a company that is consumer facing try to run its own products so far into the ground so fast and in such epic way. Like, they are making BlackBerry look well managed as it relates to their consumer products. That's how bad Microsoft has been with this. So I'm curious to see how he does with Zorin OS. This should be interesting. Last I knew, Austin is not a Linux guy, to say the least. So I'm expecting a fucking dumpster fire as these videos normally go, but I guess we'll find out. Again, Zorin OS, I think it's a good middle ground for those that want to kick the tires. Not my personal choice, but I'm not the target demo for it. And the one thing I will tell any Linux user or anybody looking to switch to Linux, every distro does matter, and every distro has a different demo, different target demographics, different needs, different requirements. That's what the different flavors are. And once you understand that, it's a lot easier to wrap your head around some of the other stuff as far as the choices that are available.
Of something like macOS or really Windows. Now, I will mention that I'm using the core version of Zorin OS. Now, that is free. However, if you want Zorin Pro, that is going to run just a little bit less than $50. They do gate a couple of the nicer features to the Pro version, specifically a lot of the themes that really make this look like macOS or Windows. I have a lot of questions. How compatible is this going to be with various different Windows programs? I'm also curious to see how this performs with something like a desktop or even trying to do something like gaming. So to learn a little bit more about how this works, I had a conversation with someone who knows a thing or two about Zorin OS.
I'm Artyom Zorin. I am the founder, co-founder, and lead developer of ZorinOS. I started it with my brother. When we actually started using Ubuntu on our computer, we saw a lot more advantages than just the eye candy. We saw that it was so much faster than Windows. So we thought to ourselves, can we bring all of those advantages that we found with Linux to a lot more people? This Windows 10 end of life has really been an inflection point.
How do you go about trying to design a distro that is friendly at the core?
Making things a lot more graphical and a lot more user-friendly and just visually appealing.
You've got 10 seconds. Give people the pitch. Why should they switch to Zorin?
It's a replacement for Windows and macOS that just makes your computer run a lot better. If you've got a computer that's, running out of support because you've got Windows 10 and you don't want to have to buy a new computer, think about switching to ZorinOS if you want, a simple experience.
And so I've decided to do exactly.
Okay. So here's the problem that I take with some of these the Linux people and their takes, as you will. It's a replacement. The problem most people have when they hear replacement, they think it is a one-to-one. It is never a one-to-one. It's an alternative, just like a Mac is an alternative to Windows. Alternative means might be similarities, or I can draw experience from here to here, but the way it might interoperate or work might be a little different. Outcome might be the same. So I take real problem with Linux folks specifically, literally using the word replacement. It is not a replacement. It is an alternative. That is a key understanding. You can argue it's semantics. It's not. It's perception. Replacement means something different than alternative to somebody. Oh, I'm going to go replace this socket. I'm just going to go get the same socket, essentially. I'm going to go find an alternative to this socket. End result's the same. But the socket might be different, the way it works might be different, etc. That is the key point that we suck at selling on Linux. We are terrible at selling that and making people understand that, because what ends up happening is it ends up bringing in the Windows brain too much, because then those people expect it to work like Windows. And I will preach this to the moon that it doesn't work like Windows, because it's not.
exactly that. With ZorinOS loaded up on my LG Gram, let's see how it is. For the first impressions, I am legitimately surprised by how normal it feels. Now, I did have to do one restart, but after that, I got the touchscreen working, and the only hardware problem I found is that while the fingerprint reader actually does show up in settings, it's too unreliable to actually register it, which fair enough for hardware this old. Performance-wise, it's obviously not as snappy as a modern laptop, but it is totally usable. It might only have 8 gigs of RAM and a 2017 Intel processor, but for my normal, fairly light use, it handles it without even needing to kick the fans on most of the time. Now, one of the major questions that I think people have when they're switching to Linux is, what about apps? Can I actually run the software I need? Zorin makes this pretty straightforward. You've got the software store built right in, and for most popular apps, they just kind of work. Chrome? Yep. Spotify? Absolutely. Slack, Todoist, pretty much all the normal productivity stuff I use on a daily basis. It's all here, and surprisingly, they're all native Linux versions. So there's no need to do any kind of weird workarounds running Wine or installing Android apps. It's there, and it just works. Now, if you need more creative apps, like I'm sure a lot of people do, there is Zorin OS Pro, which supposedly comes bundled with a lot of more professional options. Now, I actually haven't tried Pro, I'm gonna be doing that shortly, but so far in the free version, it is really, really dead simple. As for using the Gram hardware itself in 2026, you know, a laptop that's slow and unsupportive if it's running Windows. It's actually pretty solid. The keyboard is good, and actually Zorin even allows you to adjust the backlight brightness right from the control panel. It's a small thing, but it's something I've never seen on a Windows laptop before. The screen is really solid, especially considering this is a 2017 laptop, and the battery life is actually good. I'm seeing legitimately about 6 hours of mixed use with pretty high brightness. Now, the speakers are admittedly pretty bad, but that was also true when this laptop was brand new and still running Windows. The touchpad also does feel a little bit dated compared to modern laptops, but it works. It's funny, I actually just did a video comparing budget laptops under $500. And you know, I gotta say, this laptop, which I will say the last sold on eBay was only for $134, it's legitimately better than some of those brand new laptops, at least in some ways. And that is what's so frustrating about this whole situation. This laptop is not garbage, it doesn't need to be recycled, it's not e-waste. It is a perfectly capable computer that Microsoft had just decided doesn't meet the requirements anymore. But here's the thing. With a Linux distribution like Zorin OS, it really does have a new lease on life. I haven't struggled to use the Gram like I have with some of the interesting challenges I've done over the last couple of years. I'm not saying, oh, it kind of works. I'm saying it works, and it works well. But as impressive as this is, I do not want to judge Zorin OS entirely through the lens of running it on 8-year-old laptop hardware. So to put that to the test, I have loaded up a copy of Zorin OS Pro onto a much more modern device. This is a 2024 Asus ZenBook S14. First, let's talk about Zorin OS Pro.
So my only question is, so older hardware, yeah, you know, that's always been the shtick and stuff that you hear, blah, blah, blah. I really don't want to get into, oh, new lease on life for old hardware. Linux is great for reducing e-waste, I will put it that way, and getting the most out of a system. That is all I'm going to say about that. I'm curious to see what he's going to do with Zorin OS Pro. Now, some people in the Linux community will take issue with the Pro version. There's some stuff locked behind a paywall, you know, different layouts and that kind of stuff. I'm fine with it because it supports the project. And I think that's a valid way, because they also still support within that license, essentially. So I don't take issue with people selling software. Like a lot in the more purist forms tend to, you know, oh, it's open source, or, you know, free as in freedom, but also free as in beer. Because a lot of the people, unfortunately, take the free as in freedom to mean free as in beer, when in reality, it's not. You know, price to me has never been a motivator to use Linux specifically, or Linux apps or open source apps. Price has never been a motivator. What's been a motivator is they are better alternatives than the ones that are available on prior platforms. So yeah.
All due respect to my new friend, Mr. Zorin, I think that the Pro part of this software is a little bit overhyped. So if you look at the website, they describe Pro with a few benefits. One of which is that you get access to a huge amount of productivity software. And while that's true, what I don't think was as obvious is that all the software that's included in Pro is stuff you can download for free yourself. All that this is really doing is saving you a few minutes to download and set things up. Something else that is included in Zorin OS Pro, according to the website, are premium themes. And this is also true, but it's a little bit more subtle than I thought. So base Zorin OS has a few options, so you can make it look like Windows 7 or like Windows 10 or Chrome OS. So you can see right here, I'm using the Mac layout, which moves the dock to the bottom and your taskbar to the top. But the problem is that it's actually not like a true theme. For that, you actually have to go and download GNOME themes, which exist, but aren't really unique. Lastly, you are getting yourself support. Now, the support is real, but when you put all the Zorin OS Pro stuff together, it does kind of feel like some minor little quality of life things, but largely you're getting support and you're donating to the development team. Totally valid, but I will say that I think that the core version is an absolutely reasonable experience. Now, I will say that using Zorin OS on a much more modern laptop like this S14 is fine, but it's not the slam dunk that it was on the LG Gram. I will say that the touchpad drivers on Zorin OS for this S14 are not as good as the Windows 11 equivalents. There's a little bit of latency when it comes to sort of scrolling, and there's some things missing, such as Windows Hello facial recognition. I'm not really surprised.
So, point to the Windows Hello facial recognition. There's an app called Howdy. Try downloading it, see if it works. Which is included. I believe Howdy is part of could be Pop OS, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's originally where it was from for Windows facial recognition stuff. The drivers, relative, could be something as small as needing to adjust the mouse sensitivity. Sometimes is set wonky, very weirdly by developers on Linux. Again, as far as the S14, I don't have the hardware specs pulled up in front of me. So I'm curious to see what his specifications are here.
Surprised? I mean, that's obviously a very Windowsy kind of thing, but you are missing something. I will also say battery life isn't stellar. I'm getting like 6 to 7 hours on this S14, which is almost exactly what I got with the older LG Gram with a far less efficient processor and a smaller battery. I'm gonna chalk that up to the idea that they likely do not have the same level of optimization on Zorin OS for this Lunar Lake-based platform. I will also say that Linux still feels like it is behind when it comes to screen scaling. So with the LG Gram, that was a 1080p panel running at 1080p. But with modern laptops like this, they're very high resolution. This is an 1800p panel. And if this was a Windows or a Mac OS system, I would be running some level of scaling. When it comes to Zorin OS, what I've got is by default 200% scale, which is very clean, but you have almost no screen real estate to work with. So I've been using this at 175%, which feels like a nice middle ground. However, while the operating system and some apps like Chrome handle that no problem, Slack, for example, really struggle. And it does feel like it doesn't quite run as smoothly. It just feels like one of those things where this is not a problem on a desktop or an older device, but if you have a modern laptop with a high-res screen, it is not a super smooth experience. To really get a good picture of things though.
So scaling is a hit or miss. Some of it depends on the hardware, some of it depends on the resolution, some of it depends on the desktop environment. Depends on the kernel supported. I'm missing some context on Zorin because I personally don't use it. So Zorin being based on Ubuntu is probably running on 2404 generally, if I had to guess, or 2604, which is probably coming up. So they're probably on like point release 3 or 4 currently for whatever Ubuntu base they're on. Is the hardware enablement stack there? Is what level of support is there for hardware? How new Lunar Lake is fairly new. So it's all kind of relative to that. Generally, what I will say is the newer the hardware, the different style of distro you're going to need. Tailor the distro to the hardware. So what I mean by that, like this system, some reason it just doesn't play super nice with Garuda. The NVIDIA card gets all kind of wonky and weird. I don't know why. I installed CachyOS on this thing. Haven't had a single issue with it since. And I'm not saying, and I'm not an advocate for distro hopping, but sometimes, as bad as it sounds, the distro is the issue. Um, so there are a few ways to go around this, like, you can use live USBs, etc., to test out distros. You can use a tool called Ventoy to load multiple distros on one single thumb drive and test them and install them that way if you want. There's a myriad of ways to do it nowadays. I know at one point there was a site that allowed you to essentially RDP into like a server and test distros. And there's a ton of different ways to see if something is going to fit you, be it reviews, etc. So yeah, I don't advocate for distro hopping. I advocate for people using what works for them. I'm just saying sometimes the best solution is to explore beyond, say, a Zorin or etc. if you are comfortable doing that. I will always also say that the more bleeding edge, the more advanced you're going to want your distro. So if you're running more bleeding edge, newer hardware, something with a newer kernel or newer Mesa stuff, which is the graphics stack and obviously the hardware side of things, you're going to want those to be newer. Some static releases that are done every couple of years, like Ubuntu LTSs, generally don't have that. So if you're running on newer hardware, I would not recommend those distros. And I'm not saying, get good at Linux. That's not the case. I'm saying that if a Linux person is going to recommend a distro, that they really tailor the distro to the hardware. So, and obviously tailor it to the user and what they need as well. So again, just perspective is a little bit different.
Oh, there is one more thing I want to try with ZorinOS. Gaming on Linux has come a long way over the last few years, in large part thanks to the advancements that Valve have pushed forward with SteamOS, so I want to put that to the test. So I have two identical systems here, one running Windows 11 and one running ZorinOS. Now this is about the most average gaming PC you could possibly get. It is a Ryzen 5 5600X, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gig SSD, and RTX 3060 GPUs. We tried to model these pretty much based on what the most popular PC on the Steam hardware survey is. So Ken is gonna give me a hand, so you're gonna run the Windows 11 system?
Yep, begrudgingly.
So I will say, just before we even get started, just on this setup, I'm at like 80 FPS and you're like 100. So,
Right in the menu.
yeah, just in the menu, but I mean, this is actually real gameplay here. Now, CS2 is a game that is specifically optimized for Linux, right? This is not running through Proton, this is actually just working.
Right now I'm at 200 FPS average.
I'm also doing about 200 FPS. I'm having no issues at all with this.
I'm also having a good time right now.
Oh,
Yikes.
I got killed by it.
Yikes.
Can we meet somewhere and truce for a second just to do an actual like head-to-head?
If we
Wherever
don't get...
you are, I will come to you in peace. Okay, I'm sorry, I shot you when you were on the way over. Wherever you are, I will come to you in peace. What are you getting at? I'm getting 184?
187.
Oh, that's pretty close.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, we're just splitting hairs at this point.
I mean, you do have an advantage, but I don't think it's like dramatic. Why don't we try a little bit more of a demanding game, Cyberpunk 2077. I like Cyberpunk as a benchmark because unlike CS2, which is a lot more competitive and a lot more sort of CPU based, this is a very graphically demanding game, and we can do the exact same benchmark on both at the exact same time. 3, 2, 1. Oh. And then we'll hit enter in 3, 2. I'm getting 600 FPS in the loading screen.
I'm getting 109.
Well, sucks to be you. Now this is a game that is running through the Proton compatibility layer. So it is not a native Windows game. It is in fact running, again, through the SteamOS special sauce. Actually, that's not far off.
It's marginally better on the Windows machine, but not by much.
And to be fair, this is not SteamOS. We are running ZorinOS, a game that we just installed via Steam. No hoops, no workarounds, it is just working. 89 versus 98. Okay, this is actually pretty close. I guess the takeaway here is that if you're using an NVIDIA GPU, that yeah, you're probably giving up a little bit of performance, but this is a copy of ZorinOS that I installed in this system over here like an hour ago, and now we're playing Windows games off of Steam, and it's like nothing ever happened. So after all of this, I've got to say ZorinOS, and Linux more broadly, is legitimately impressive for older hardware. It gave my Gram a genuine second life. Now if you're sitting on a Windows 10 system that can't upgrade to 11, it's really worth trying. It's free, it's surprisingly capable, and it might just save you from buying a new computer that you don't actually need. Which brings us back to Microsoft. Look, the Windows 11 upgrade situation has been unnecessarily messy. You've got millions of capable computers that are obsolete now based on totally arbitrary installation requirements. I think that Windows' reputation has taken a real hit lately. This really reminds me of one of the best moves that Apple ever made for the Mac. Back in 2009, they released macOS 10 Snow Leopard. And you know what the big feature was? Nothing. Apple spent an entire year not adding new things. Instead, they focused on making the operating system faster, more stable, and more efficient. Snow Leopard is still remembered as one of the best versions of macOS ever because it just, well, it worked. Microsoft, I think, needs a Snow Leopard moment of their own. I mean, look at what they've done to get better performance from the Xbox Ally. By default, it doesn't load big, unnecessary parts of Windows. What if, and this is a crazy thought, they do that for all PCs? Everyone needs OneDrive to automatically open every time you turn on your computer, right? Not me. OneDrive. Here's what I think Microsoft should actually do. Extend Windows 10 support properly. Not with paid upgrades or a bunch of hoops to jump through, just extend it. I mean, give people a little bit more time. And then take a year, maybe even 2, and fix Windows 11. I'm personally tired of dealing with stuff like OneDrive and Copilot being shoved in my face. For years, we've lived in a world where Windows could get bigger and more bloated because PCs just constantly got more powerful. You didn't even notice. But with the current RAM crisis, that's not a guarantee going forward. Instead of constantly adding new features like a house of cards, focus on making Windows faster, more stable, more efficient. The hardware is not the problem. I think Windows is. So fix it before more and more people are tempted by Linux, by Mac, or even by Google's upcoming Aluminum OS. There are a lot of great options out there, and there are fewer and fewer lock-ins to keep people on Windows every day. It's time to do something about it. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring-a-ling that ding-a-ling.
Okay, so I do find the perspective interesting. Windows is the problem. Glad to see you had an interesting experience with ZorinOS. Have pros and cons as far as that, but it's interesting seeing somebody that is not a Linux user at all. He has been on record as being essentially a Windows fanboy, and I'll leave it at that. As far as like even on things like Steam OS, Deck and all the other stuff. Oh, give me an ROG because it plays everything. Yeah, except for the user experience. It's garbage on Windows. And what he's finding out is that Windows is the problem. I've been saying Windows has been the problem. Like as an example, on the Deck specifically, Windows is the problem because that form factor Microsoft has never been able to figure out and nail down. The only time they did was like with the Zune HD and the Zune OS. That was the only time. Windows Phone, too. Every other time they butchered it, and they still are. So yeah, Windows is the problem. I don't see them fixing it. I see them shoving more features and functions and never having a Snow Leopard moment at this particular point in time. For every time they push an update out, they break fucking something. So Microsoft is going all in on AI code. So the fact that we're seeing a lot of this breakage and stuff and a lack of QA doesn't surprise me. And unfortunately, it's probably going to continue. Microsoft will run Windows into the ground much in the same light that they have their Xbox division. I've never met a company, again, that is so willing to run every major product category of theirs into the fucking ground for one thing that, while potentially could be big, I don't think it's going to be around, but it's we have these pops every time. You have Web 2.0, IoT, Web 3.0, it's cycles. AI is just the next cycle. And Microsoft is jumping on the train yet again, and everything else be damned, and we're going to ruin everything for it. As they always have. So Microsoft will keep being Microsoft. So I got really nothing more to say. What do you guys think of his experience trying Zorin OS? I thought it was quite interesting to see from a non-Windowsy, non-Linux user using Linux. So props to him for actually doing that, because usually I take a lot of issues with these guys, but I'll give him credit on that for doing a fair shake. Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are. You guys know what to do. Comment, rate, subscribe, all that fun. And we got on Patreon and Humble Bundle are in the links below. And I will talk to you on the next one. Peace.